So it is a combination of the two worlds, and that you have to explain as well, which is not easy because when we were coming there in China, people were a little bit afraid that a Western company is coming to overtake it and to do it better. And we have always been saying, well, we are not doing it better, we are doing it differently, and together we can be better.
Rijk Schipper comes from the Netherlands. He has worked and lived in Shanghai from 2005 to 2008 as Business Group President for all SCA Packaging and Hygiene businesses in Asia Pacific. SCA is a leading hygiene and forest products company in Europe with offices worldwide. In this podcast, Rijk shared with us about the challenges of leading SCA businesses and joint ventures in China, about the general cultural differences and business culture differences, and how he approached those differences. He also shared the strengths of Chinese people he saw in those years and what people from different cultures can learn from each other. Furthermore, Rijk also shared about the second part of his entrepreneurial life. For 10 years, he has been representing a lot of Chinese contemporary artists to sell their artworks in Europe. Rijk shared about the friendships with those artists, how he built the friendships, and how the China journey has created new viewpoints, added new dimensions, and enriched his life. I really enjoyed this conversation with Rijk. He is so humble and kind. I hope you will also enjoy this conversation. Hi, good afternoon, Rijk. Welcome. I'm so excited to talk to you. First of all, please tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, thank you very much, May. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I'm Rijk Schipper. I'm Dutch citizen, and I'm 70 years of age. I am at the moment running a gallery with Chinese contemporary art. But before doing that, I've worked 30 years for an international Swedish company in Europe, Middle East, and in Asia.
You just mentioned you worked many years for a Swedish company.
Yes,
internationally. Correct. In 2005, you moved to Shanghai to lead this company you worked for, SCA Packaging and Hygiene businesses in Asian Pacific. And SCA was one of the largest players in the packaging industry, I think, in Europe at that time, right?
Yeah, correct.
And you have worked and lived in China for a number of years. And could you please just share with us a little bit about how it was to live and work in China?
Yeah, I can. In fact, I started in December 2004. After I was asked by my boss, the CEO of the company, he tried several times to convince me that I had to join the operations in Asia. We had a rather big business, or businesses, I should say, packaging, hygiene, timber business, and the plans were that has to be combined. And he was thinking that I was the right person to do so. But to be very honest, I have never been on holiday in Asia. I have been visiting Sri Lanka on holidays, but further than that, I've never been. So I was very hesitant. Shall I move to Asia, living in China at that moment? And then he said, well, after 3 or 4 times talking to me and convincing me, you have to go, you have to see it. I'm pretty sure that you will love it. So we went there in November 2004. And I met people in the company at that moment. I saw China. I saw as well Shanghai, because the headquarters at that moment were in Shanghai. And in fact, it was a rather big surprise what to see. A bustling city, a huge city, heavy traffic, beautiful buildings, and of course a lot of Chinese. And after 3 days together there with my wife, we decided, yeah, we could live here. And I thought, after talking to the people in the company, yes, I could work here. So we came back to Europe and we said, yes, let's go there. So within a month, we moved. So that was very, very fast, in fact. And that has been a great journey. We have been living there together 3.5, 4 years. Before moving back to Europe. And then afterwards, I've been there living another 2, 3 years. Great experience.
Oh, great to hear. And I think when you were there, you need to manage people in 13 countries in Asian Pacific.
Yeah, correct.
And yes, and also a lot of people. How many people you need to manage at that moment in Asian Pacific for SCA?
We had in that moment around 10,000 people working in China, Malaysia, Korea, Japan, Australasia, both in the hygiene business as well in the packaging business. So it was in fact the biggest business group at that moment when it comes to the number of people, not when it comes to turnover, because we did a little bit more than $1 billion in turnover.
Wow. And how many factories did SCA have in China back then?
How many countries?
How many factories in China?
How many factories? We had at the moment around 20 factories in the packaging industry. And we were looking to expand in the tissue business as well, in the hygiene business. So we were looking for opportunities to acquire local tissue companies, which we finally did by acquiring a very big player in the Chinese market, Vinda.
Okay. And I understood from you that some of the factories, especially that those 20 factories from the packaging business, you said it was a joint venture business with a Chinese partner, right?
Yeah, partly it was joint ventures. We acquired the business from a Chinese entrepreneur. Yes. And some of the factories were joint ventures at that time when we took over the total business. So we were running in totally, I think, 3 joint ventures within these 20 companies.
Okay. And what were the challenges of leading the joint ventures in China as a European, especially as a Dutchman? Because the culture is so different.
It's so different. Yeah, it is. It is. Well, I would say plenty of challenges. First of all, the business which we acquired was not doing that well. It was underperforming when we would compare to our businesses which we had in Europe and North America. So that was one of the tasks, to get it up and running in a better way in order to make a better profitability over time. So that was one challenge. And then the second challenge was, of course, to understand why the business was not profitable. And we did a lot of studies, we did a lot of benchmarking, and finally we were getting grip on that. Market is huge. The packaging market in China is huge, but as well very, very competitive, as a lot of local companies are competing with the international companies which are there. And then there is, of course, if I say you have to understand what is happening, it means as well that you have to understand how the Chinese are running companies, how they think, how they act. And that is a challenge, I would say, for every Caucasian which is coming to China.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think also for those factories in China, many joint venture factories with Chinese partners, sometimes they also face some local problems, like the factories are running by the families and they are just not honest, or just employees were not honest. That kind of things always happen. How did you manage such kind of things and to make people work properly for you again and to just change the management? Did you face that kind of situations and problems?
That's a good question, May. Yes, we found out that by doing this benchmarking, that the results were caused by, well, a behavior which is different than to the behavior we see in North America or in Europe. And one of the things which was different is that we acquired a family company which was run by, I would say, 20 nephews, cousins, brothers, sisters, sometimes very capable, but very often not capable. Being, of course, family, but not really managers of relatively big companies, because most of the factories were having around 300 to 500 employees. And quite a lot of turnover as well. So when we were understanding by benchmarking why the results were not that good, we find out as well that management as such were not that good and not that proper. So we at a certain moment took a decision to have an audit and an assessment of all the management teams. So we have assessed more than 150 people running those 20 companies. And we have been doing that by a Chinese professional company, which we hired. And they have been during 4 or 5 months assessing all those people, which gave us a lot of information. And based on this information, we have created new management teams. We have been asking some people to leave, some managers to leave as well, which we had to do very carefully and in good discussion with those people, and as well with the former owner, because it was all family members of him. And we created new management teams because the assessment gave us a good idea as well, which of the people in those factories in the management teams were good leaders, which we could use in the future with our new strategy. That took us, I think, totally 1.5 years before we were at the end and formed new management teams.
Yes, and Rijk, I can imagine it can be very challenging to deal with such a process in the China in totally different environments, especially you also need to consider a lot of elements of the Chinese culture. And is it you also worked at the management level in Europe? Is the process are the processes different? If you look back at that moment, how you fired these people, you replace them, what are the differences actually?
Yeah, there's many differences between running businesses in Europe or running them in Asia, especially China, I would say. And there are a lot of things which are interesting because you can learn quite a lot by seeing those differences. First of all, of course, I think that we were acquiring a company which was a family company, and the decisions were taken by the owner. And he was doing that on a Friday afternoon, and on Saturday things were happening. Decisions about investments were done under a glass of tea or under dinner, without taking a lot of notes and without taking a lot of investigations. And coming in an international company, which my company was running in more than 40 countries, doing a turnover of around 15 billion euro. Of course, you have a lot of processes, a lot of things which go due to those processes quite slowly. And that has been a challenge both for me and my management team, as well for the Chinese, because they suddenly had to live up to an environment which they were not used to. They were willing to take decisions on a Friday afternoon and then implement them on the Saturday morning. And we were saying, well, we have to go with this paper first to the board. Next board meeting is next month. Then we will get a decision, and then we will give feedback, and then we can start in 3 months. So they were panicking as well. This is going to last too long. So I think that is one difference. People are in China very fast fixing things very fast, but the backgrounds of those decisions are very much based on short-term vision and not long-term strategies. So I would say that has been a challenge for us to explain that a big company is moving differently than a smaller company, with a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, sometimes frustrating as well, but sometimes very useful, because strategies, if they are really well made, can drive you and can drive your business in a very good and optimal way. So at a certain moment, when we had all those Chinese people together in this packaging organization, and we had organized some big conferences where we were explaining the strategies, a lot of the people were adhering and were applauding and very happy that they were working for an international company which was willing to invest. And they were understanding as well that we were doing it a little bit different than the private owner which they had before.
It's really so interesting that you took this process to explain why you do it in this way. I think when they understand why you have such kinds of processes, then they will think, oh, it's actually quite good, and then they will just cooperate and just to follow the processes and also the regulations from the company. It's really interesting to hear this. And Rijk, you also shared a story about the iPhone packaging machines with me. I found it so fascinating, and could you please share the story with our audience, because it's such a nice story.
You mean the joint venture partner in Beijing?
Yes, and with the iPhone machines and how they deal with the starting the machines without knowing how to, without the guidance of the experts from Europe.
The interesting thing was we had a big contract for making iPhones. At least the packaging of iPhones, and a part of this is the inner shape in which the iPhone is sitting in the carton box. The carton box was made by another company, by the way, and we had to invest quite a lot in new machines. A relatively small machine, but still a big investment. And those machines were coming from the Netherlands, where the technology was invented. And all those machines were put in crates from Holland, shipped to China, and they were arriving in the factory in Shanghai. And there was a new hall which was erected for this, and 3 or 4 engineers and technicians from Holland should come to build up those machines, instruct Chinese workers in order to run on those machines the products for Apple. And they should arrive at a certain date, and they were coming in the hall, and all those 20 machines were running, not up to full speed, but they were running almost at full speed. And the technicians coming from Holland, they were surprised. What happened? How is that possible? And I think that is something which is typically Chinese. The Chinese are so inventive, they are fast, they are technically very well adapted. They thought, well, we cannot wait 3 weeks seeing those wooden crates with machines in. We know that we have to run and build production cycles. So let's start. We will find out. And they were finding out because they have a lot of knowledge about other machines. So this was almost an easy cookie for them.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story. Yeah. I think this is also really, just like you said, Rijk, it's just really typical Chinese. They will just figure out, and we always see the Chinese are doing things. They are crossing the river by filling the stones. They just try it, feel how I can get to the other side. Rijk, if you look back at your time working in China, what are the strengths of Chinese people? Based on your experience of leading such a huge operation in China.
I would say they have an extremely high sensitivity for speed. I have another example. Once I was invited by the guy who was running all those operations of packaging. It was a Singaporean Chinese reporting to me. And he asked me if I was willing to talk to the people of his company. So around 200 people in the management teams at that moment. And I mentioned a little bit too open and too blunt as a Dutchman, some things. And he told me, well, that was a little bit too open because the Chinese were doing it already in the afternoon. They were phoning to the company and said, well, the boss has been spoken. We have to do this and this, so let's do it. So I think that is one of the strengths of the Chinese. They are acting without a lot of discussion, and they are doing that very often rather professional because they have a lot of technical knowledge. So speed is something which is exceptional compared to what we see in the Western world. And I would say that gives them an extremely big competitive edge.
Yeah, I can imagine. But if you look at people in Europe, and especially if we look at Dutch people, how they work, they're planning long term, and they have such kind of solid process thinking. And in your eyes, how can Chinese learn from us, from Dutch and from European people and from people from Europe? And also, how can we learn from Chinese? What kind of strengths we should combine?
Yeah. Well, for sure, I would say it's not only Chinese or Dutch or South American and Europeans. I think it goes probably for all different cultures. There is quite a lot to see and to find in another culture. And I think the opportunity is there for companies who are working in other culture to combine that. If you come as a company, we were a Swedish company, but we were European based as well. If you come to another area like Asia and you think that you can apply all the rules like they are in Western Europe, you can forget it. It's not working. So you have to be open for finding a modus to operate, which is probably, if you find the right modus, a much better operation modus than what you have in your own territory. So what you should do is listen carefully and see carefully what is happening in the area you are working and combine it with the strength you have as a company yourself. So what we could bring to Asia and to China is process thinking, planning, strategic thinking. What we could bring back is action orientation, commercial orientation, less bureaucracy, things like that. Even if there is bureaucracy in China as well, a lot of things go faster and don't get so thick in papers as they are in the Western world. So it is a combination of the two worlds, and that you have to explain as well, which is not easy because when we were coming there in China, people were a little bit afraid that a Western company is coming to overtake it and to do it better. And we have always been saying, well, we are not doing it better, we are doing it differently, and together we can be better.
Wow, brilliant. Like there's such a great, I think, great lessons and also great tips for people who are dealing with joint ventures and with Chinese partners. There, really, thank you. Like, and before we move to your art business, I also think I also want to ask you, like you live in China as such a position. How about your personal experience with your driver, with your the people close to you? And how did you experience that part of your life?
Yeah, well, if I look back, because it's now some years ago, if I look back, it has been one of the best periods in my life, in my working life and private life as well. I had no idea what the Chinese were. The only Chinese I knew before going there were the Chinese running Chinese restaurants. And they, what I found out, are mostly coming out of Wenzhou, which is a big town in China. But all the other 1.3 billion people I've not seen. And I think the Chinese are extremely friendly. They're warm. They're welcoming. They are very open-minded when it comes to other cultures. They're curious. They have an extremely cute humor. I've been laughing quite a lot with Chinese, even with Chinese on high level. If you can tell a good joke, they can laugh quite a lot. So the private life has been good as well. However, it is hampered, of course, by not being able to talk fluently their language. And their English skills at the moment that we were there were still relatively poor. Today, it is much better because more youngsters are learning English. So it is a little bit easier to communicate with Chinese than it was in the past.
You also had a driver and who drove you every day, and I think you had a lot of contact with your driver and also your family, right?
Yeah, right. He was a driver. I didn't choose him. They choose the company human resource manager choose him for me, so to say. And he has been driving us for 4 or 5 years. And that was an experience because he was not speaking English. I was not speaking in the beginning, of course, one word of Mandarin. So we were sitting 2 hours at least a day in the car to drive to and from the office at the edge of Shanghai. And we were living in the city center of Shanghai. So yeah, what are you doing? I was working, of course, in the car because there was a lot of work, but I was every day as well talking to him and trying to teach him a little bit English. And he was trying to teach me a little bit Chinese until the moment that my secretary said, Rijk, don't learn Chinese from Xiaoliu because he's Shanghainese, so he's speaking Shanghainese, not Mandarin. But we had great time together, and they were so welcoming. So he invited me at home. I've been, I think, 6-7 times at home, having dinner with him. He was living in a very small apartment. And then when my mother came to China, she was invited, my daughters as well. Every time there was a dinner, and they were living in a very humble home. But he was always very happy and proud to invite us and to show it to us. So we had a great time with him. And the funny thing is that his daughter, he had one daughter. His daughter studied at a certain moment in Holland. We took her to Holland, and we make sure that she could study here at the university in The Hague. So that was nice as well. That was something we could do back to her.
Oh, so great, so kind. It's I think yeah, what you just described about your driver, it's a very typical characteristic of Chinese people. They're very warm, and they let everybody to join them to have dinner, and if you just pass by, they will invite you for dinner. So it's totally different from Europe and from our life here in the Netherlands. And the second part of your interaction with China is your art life. Yeah, you started working with Chinese contemporary artists 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
You are representing about 40 Chinese artists at this moment, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
How did you find all of these artists, and how did you build the relationship with them?
Yeah, it's a good question, mate. When we were living in China, and I was still working for the Swedish company, we had not so much to do in the weekends. We were busy because there were a lot of things to see, of course, but there are no forests, there is no sea, there are no lakes. So you are looking for other entertainment. And one of the things we liked very much was visiting museums, seeing art and other things. And we find out that there was a rather modern art scene in Shanghai. Artists living in old factory buildings and working there and trying to sell as well their art. So we have been visiting that quite a lot, meeting some of those artists very early on and buying from them different pieces of art for ourselves. And in fact, that has been a little bit the start of the business we are doing now, because at that moment, I had no clue that I was ending up in doing art business with China. But I met several people then, and I kept contact with them since then. So at the moment, we have around 40 artists, which we are representing in the whole of Europe or parts of Europe. Several of them I know already since 2004, 2005, which is quite a long period as well. And we have been visiting them all. I know all the artists. I've been at home. I've been, as you said earlier, you are invited to have dinner with them, drinking tea for the whole afternoon, all the time saying shishini and more tea and more tea and more tea. But making friends probably for life. Several of the artists, we have a very close bond, and we probably like each other. So at the moment that I was coming back from China, knowing some of those artists, I thought, I love art. Let's do something completely different, not going into the hygiene industry or packaging industry, but trying to do something with my passion, which is art, and then finding the connection with China, because at that moment, around 10, 12 years ago, there was not that much of Chinese contemporary art in Western Europe. So we started our gallery called Kunstbroeders, Art Brothers in English. And in the beginning, I was doing that with my brother. Today, I'm doing it alone with my wife and with help of a friend, which I have. And well, it has been growing. And then with let's say, 3, 4, 5 artists starting, but very easily growing to the 40 we have, because every artist has been doing an academical study. They have been at university, they have been sitting with classmates. So what you get is that they say, Rijk, have you interest in seeing a work of a friend of mine? Because I have a friend who's making very nice paintings or very nice sculptures. Can you please have a look, because he's making so nice work. And then, of course, I get the information. We are talking via WeChat or via email. I'm seeing what they are making. Sometimes I don't like it, and then I have to be very politely and not be too rough in saying that it is not nice for us or it will not work here in the European market. But very often it is very nice. And then we are starting, well, from low levels, the business and the cooperation together. So it is relatively easy as such, because they all have friends. They're all sitting around a round table, having dinner together, talking and showing photos, because they are doing that, of course, like we are doing. And then they are talking about their experience with the Dutch gallery and say, well, you have to talk to this guy because he can do something for you in Europe. So it's growing like that.
Oh, great! It's just organically via the one of the artists, and you get to know another one. Like you also told me that during the last 10 years of collaboration with Chinese artists, you never had really big problems. Also, nobody had ever cheated you. And
No.
what are the crucial steps you take to make sure that you can do business with Chinese people so pleasantly and successfully? Because many people have totally different experiences.
Yeah, maybe I have been very lucky. I don't know, but I think first of all, we are not coming out of the art world, so we are not, let's say, professionally educated in art. So what is driving us is our taste for things which are beautiful and special. That's one part of it, but as important is probably the person who's making it. So we would like to work and cooperate with nice people, with nice artists. And you don't know that, of course, from the beginning, who's nice and who's not nice. But as you mentioned, we have not been cheated once. We had not difficulties once in all those years with 40 artists. We are cooperating. We have sometimes discussion about certain things, but many of them are friends. And well, with friends, you have sometimes as well words, but never conflicts. And if there is something, you are solving them in good order. And I think one of the things is by not speaking the language, because my Chinese is very poor. And I would say generally all the artists, their English is relatively poor. So I used quite a lot a translator in discussing with them. But the most important thing is having the time to get to know each other, being open and trustful, and being humble, not asking too much, not giving too much, because there's as well some negotiation, but trying to understand the person behind the art as well. And being sincerely interested in the person and his life and why he is making things. And then you are over time building up a relationship where you have to invest as well. We invested quite a lot in artists as well. And they invest with their creativity, so to say.
Yeah, it's so important. You just get really to know this artist and about the stories behind his art, because that will tell. They give you the feeling whether you can trust or whether it will be something for you and to promote here. And because the story is the most interesting part next to the art. The artwork itself. And Rijk, what are the differences between the Chinese artists, the Dutch artists? I'm just curious, because there must be, normally we think about business, but artists they are so different. They are creative people. Yeah. And what are the differences between them? For example, if we think about their creation or just marketing and sales or develop themselves as artists, any aspect of these things, do you also see big differences between Chinese and Dutch artists?
It's a difficult question, May, because I've never worked with Dutch artists.
No.
So I don't know if there are different. But I would say, of course, one thing which is different, which I see, is that all Chinese artists are very well educated. They have been to the academy. They have been learning for 3-4 years there the technical sides of their profession. So they are quite good in drawing. They are quite good in, if you look to how they look at technical things, they are really well mastering it. Before they are able to be an artist themselves and find their own creativity, they have to work according to what is being taught by the university. And that is sometimes a negative thing and sometimes a positive thing. In education in China, it's a lot. I once an example from somebody who said to me, teachers in school can say in China to a class, boys and girls, this is a black wall. Even if the wall was white, it's a black wall. And nobody in the classroom would say, sorry, sir, this is a white wall. where in Europe 30 kids would say and laughing and would say, "Hello, sir, this is white and not black. You're wrong." So the Chinese are following, and they are following in art as well, in education of art, by drawing 2 or 3 years the most beautiful things, but they have to follow the professor. The professor saying what you have to do. And then at a certain moment, they are free to make things themselves. And then you see, in fact, 2 kinds of artists. You see artists which are having an extremely high energy and creativity, and artists which don't have that, like in the rest of the world, where you have a lot of artists who don't have any creativity as well. And we are looking for those with creativity, of course, and with an own, let's say, hand or an own view on how to make things, because it should be a little bit different and it should not be mainstream. So that's what we try to find.
Yeah, I saw a lot of your the works of your artists. I think people watch the YouTube film can also see the painting at the backside of you hanging on the wall.
Yeah,
They are also from Chinese artists.
Right.
And I understood from you, Rijk, that this artist will you will have an exhibition for this artist next week.
Yeah, next week, Saturday, the 11th of February, this artist, she's a Chinese artist coming from Shanghai, born in Shanghai, but lived in Macau. But she's married with a French man, so she's living in Paris. And she's coming here the weekend to show how she is drawing beautiful ink paintings on Xuan rice paper. So we are very excited to have her.
It's next weekend.
Next weekend and the weekend after, but next weekend she is here 2 days, 2 afternoons herself. Yeah.
Okay, so people can come to the gallery to watch her drawing and to see her artwork. Rijk, if we look at your journey in China, you have 2 total different lives. I think in China, one is as a president of a huge multinational for Asian Pacific, and another one is really as an entrepreneur and represent such a lot of artists, creative people selling the works, especially many young artists. You really want to help them also to promote their artwork in Europe. Did this journey, China journey, really impact and change you as a person? I'm curious.
That's a deep question. Good question. I think thinking about it, probably yes. I think I've been by running the company for those years in Asia. It has formed to be quite a lot. I've been running 2 divisions before here in Europe, Western divisions of the company. So a lot of things are similar, but the context of a so other culture is giving a new dimension, which really enriched my life and my viewpoints on the world as well. So that helped me quite a lot. And the art business, I should say, is adding even one thing on top of that, because I think artists generally, but as I said before, I don't know so much about Western artists because I have no contact with them. But the artists I'm working with are so generous, so nice, warm, welcoming. They are humble. They are sometimes a little bit afraid. If you, for example, I have a painter which is quite good, An Koen. And when I told him that I loved his paintings, he blushed. He was changing. He was not able to talk for some minutes because he probably never got a compliment. And I was sincere because I love them. I love the paintings, and I think that's the difference. They are not arrogant. No, they are most of them are very humble, hardworking people who are trying to follow their heart and make something which is beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful answer. Right, thank you. And just to wrap up this podcast, could you please give a few tips to people who want to do business successfully in China?
You probably can write 5 books about how to do successful business in China.
Yeah.
I remember when I went there, as I mentioned before, I have never been in Asia before, so it has been a culture shock. And before going there, I was talking to a coach or trainer, a consultant who was living already for 25 years in Asia doing business with China. And he was a man from Switzerland. And he told me during a dinner which we had together, be aware, if you go to China, be aware that you should not judge people on how they look like or how well or how bad they talk English. And that's one thing you should understand, because you should not judge people on their outer side, but on their inner side, their heart. That is what is driving. So that has been a quite good tip, which I've been trying to find. And then I think what helped me quite a lot is to try to understand the culture. So I've been reading quite a lot before going there, and while being in China, try to understand a little bit the culture, because there are so nice things in the culture. Small things like having dinner with Chinese and the fight around who's paying the check, who is being served first and how, and which is enriching your life, which is very nice. So try to understand the culture. Try to see that people are behaving different than what we are doing, and don't see that as something strange and be against it. On the contrary, try to embrace it, because the difference sometimes is giving the possibility to judge your own behavior and put it in perspective. Speaking some words of Mandarin is helpful. People are so happy and can laugh so much if you make mistakes, but they're so happy if you try, because they know as well that they don't speak so well English. So they are so happy if you talk a little bit Chinese, and then you can talk with your hands and your feet, and that helps quite a lot. So communication is always possible, but when you have let's say discussions, business discussions with people, and you have to make contracts, it's always good to have a good translator with you. That you should not do. But so getting the culture, knowing the language, yes. And then I think, which is generally true, not only for China, but try to be humble and try to be friendly. Try to be sincerely open and willing to understand who is the other side of at the table. And the Chinese are warming and friendly. I've had so many beautiful evenings and days with people in business and as well in art. And I have still a lot of friends out of my packaging and hygiene business. I don't do business with them for more than 10 years, but you still have them, and you can talk to them from time to time. So yes, it has been for me an extremely warm journey to be in Asia and to be in China.
Yeah, Rijk, thank you so much. These are so valuable tips, and thank you for sharing them. And I just for the listeners who want to get in touch with you, how can they find you and get to know the artworks of the Chinese artists?
Yeah, that's interesting, of course, because there are beautiful artworks. Yeah,
yes.
The gallery is called Kunstbroeders. So they can go to kunstbroeders.com. and kunst. I don't know if you in your podcast somewhere are writing
Yes.
that. That's a possibility. They can follow us on Instagram. They can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm there with my name, Rijk Schipper. And so there's always possibilities to see the art and to learn more about it.
Thank you, Rijk. And I will put all of the contact information of Kunstbroeders, and also you and your contact details, your Instagram, all of the information in the podcast show notes and YouTube show notes. So for all of the listeners, you can find the contact details of Rijk in the podcast show notes. And I think for the people who want to watch the podcast on YouTube, I will really recommend to you to watch the YouTube podcast, because I will put a lot of photos of the artists and also the artworks in the introduction parts. So you can also see some of the artists and some of their artworks. So thank you so much, Rijk, for your time, for sharing the beautiful stories. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, May, for giving me the opportunity as well to share some of it with you and your audience.
Thank you. They are so valuable. Thank you, Rijk.
Thank you very much for listening. You can also watch the interview on Our Cultures and Our World podcast YouTube channel. If this podcast is valuable to you and your business, please subscribe and help me by sharing this podcast with more people. It's my mission to help people from different cultures to connect with each other, learn from each other, and inspire each other. You can also go to check out my website for more information about what I do and the kindness projects I support. I genuinely hope that this podcast and the stories my guests share will give all of us insights, ideas, and inspiration to create a more connected world together.